The night my own mother looked me dead in the eye at Christmas dinner, in front of everyone, and said, "You're just a burden." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't flip the table. I walked out to my car, grabbed one thin folder, came back in, and quietly ended my entire family's free ride in under 5 minutes. They thought I was the weak one, the single daughter with nothing going on. They had no idea I was the one holding their whole life together. Before you judge me, watch this to the end, and ask yourself one question. If your family did this to you, would you stay and save them, or walk away and save yourself? My name is Elena. I'm 35 years old. And before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The Christmas table was set like something out of a magazine. Cranberry glaze still clung to the sides of the ham platter. The flicker of white taper candles danced off the rim of Mom's polished china. And I remember thinking that I should have sat closer to the exit. I was wedged between my older brother Jason and my cousin Trish. Jason had already poured himself his third glass of red. The stem of the glass was pinched between his fingers, his knuckles a little too white, the way they always got when he was pretending to be relaxed. Trish was too busy arranging her mashed potatoes under the best light she could find, tilting her plate and her phone, taking the same picture over and over without really looking at any of us. Her screen lit up her face more than the candles did. Across the table, Mom carved through the turkey breast with her usual control, the knife moving in smooth, practiced strokes, each slice the same width as the last. We were deep into the second round of dinner, and the tension was not new. It sat on the table with the side dishes, familiar and unspoken. It never is in families like mine. We have this tradition we never named. We do not say what we mean, but we punish people who do not play along. A joke that cuts a little too close. A question that feels like a test. A silence that lasts just long enough to sting. I had brought a pecan pie and a bottle of decent Cabernet. I drove from my apartment with the pie cooling on a towel in the passenger seat, checking it at every red light to make sure the glossy top had not cracked. The bottle clinked softly in the bag on the floor. Neither of them got touched. Not because they were not good. They just sat at the end of the counter, near the outlet where no one ever stands. They were ignored because I was the one who brought them. Mom always had this way of making me feel like I was 10 years old again. Not in the sweet way people mean when they talk about feeling like a kid. In the other way. The way where you are constantly bracing, waiting to be told you are too much or not enough. In the helpless, do not embarrass us kind of way. She sat at the head of the table, like a queen presiding over a court. Her chair was a little taller, the fabric a little less worn than the others. Her plate was different too, that old pattern from my grandmother that no one else was allowed to use. Her spine was straight, shoulders square, lipstick still perfect. And she had that look, the one she gives when she is about to ruin someone's appetite. She set her fork down on the plate with a soft clink. No warning. No build-up. You are just a burden. She did not clear her throat first. She did not soften it with my name. She did not wrap it in concern. Just like that. Flat. Final. Like she was reading off a list she had been rehearsing in her head all day. My breath stopped. So did the conversation. The television noise from the living room felt far away. Even the clink of silverware went quiet. Trish glanced up, then looked straight back down at her phone, thumb already moving. Jason shifted in his seat but did not say a word, his jaw tight, his eyes nailed to his plate. My Uncle Todd coughed and took a sip of water, eyes suddenly very interested in the ceiling. I sat there, frozen, while the candle beside me hissed and flickered. The smell of turkey and stuffing turned heavy, like the air itself had thickened. She had not said it loud. She did not need to. It was the kind of sentence that split the air like glass breaking in a church. And here is the part I think shocked them the most. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I did not argue. I just looked at her and nodded. There was a beat where I saw confusion flash across her face, like she had expected a bigger reaction and did not know what to do without it. Okay. One word. It felt calm in my mouth. Then I went back to cutting my turkey. The knife tapped softly against the plate. I swallowed a bite that tasted like nothing, chewed it slowly, folded my napkin when I was done, smoothed it with my fingers, laid it gently in my lap, and I waited. Because if they thought that was the end of it, they did not know me at all. Growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, the rule was simple. Family does not talk about money, or feelings, or favors. We just owe each other silently. Debts get stacked in the dark, and whoever keeps score is called ungrateful. But I had been keeping score since I was 21. At first, it was only in my head. Little mental notes taped to memories. Since the year Mom got sick and could not work, when the house went quiet in the afternoons and the envelopes on the counter started to look different. Since the mortgage almost slipped through their fingers, and I was the one who answered the unknown numbers calling the house phone. Since Jason borrowed $4,000 for his trucking idea and never brought it up again once the business failed. Since the first time I put my name on something I did not own because they asked, and I said yes. A utility account, a credit card, a signature at the bottom of a document I did not have time to read because they were already late, because that is what a good daughter does. She believes them when they say it is just for a little while. She trusts that they will remember. They do not remember those parts. But I do. They remember the year I could not come home for Easter because my job would not approve the time off, and I chose my rent over plane tickets. They remember the time I forgot Aunt Linda's birthday, and how that turned into a story that still gets dragged out at holidays. They remember how I live alone in an apartment at 35, like that is some failure instead of proof that I can carry myself. They do not see the medical bills I paid quietly, logging in after work with tired eyes and entering my card numbers in little glowing boxes. Or the house insurance I covered just until things stabilized, which somehow turned into 3 years. Or the groceries I ordered online and shipped to Mom's address because she did not want to be seen using food stamps. They forgot all that. Conveniently. The moment dinner ended, people started peeling off. Chairs scraped back. Someone made a joke about needing to walk off the mashed potatoes. Jason slipped into the living room, pretending to refill his drink, letting the commercial break keep him company instead of me. Trish excused herself to freshen up, which meant hiding in the bathroom with her phone and her reflection. Even Mom did not look at me again. She busied herself with plastic wrap and storage containers, asking my aunt to help her pack away leftovers like the words she had just said were nothing special. I pushed my chair in, set my napkin on the table, pulled on my coat and felt for my keys, the familiar weight grounding me for a second. The cold December air hit my face when I stepped outside, clear and sharp. It felt cleaner than the air over that table. I walked to the car without saying another word. Inside the back seat was a manila folder. Slim. Nothing fancy. The cardboard was a little bent at the corners from being moved around, waiting. But inside it, everything. Receipts folded and refolded. Bank statements with my name and Mom's name printed side by side. Insurance confirmations. Screenshots printed out from online portals. Proof of transfer history. Utility logs. And one final notarized letter confirming the immediate termination of all automatic payments tied to Mom's house. My hand was steady when I picked it up. I noticed that. I noticed the absence of shaking more than I would have noticed the shaking itself. I did not feel empty. I did not feel wild with anger. I just felt done. I walked back in as they were laughing over dessert. Someone had opened the store-bought pumpkin pie. There were crumbs on the coffee table and a smear of whipped cream on one of the cushions. The television was louder, filling the space where the earlier silence had been. Mom. My voice was not loud, but everyone heard it. She turned, startled, still holding her dessert fork in mid-air. I walked over and placed the folder gently on the coffee table. No drama, no theatrics. Since I am a burden, I thought I should stop carrying things for everyone else. The room went very still. The laughter cut off mid-sound. Even Trish put down her phone, the screen going dark. Jason stood blinking with the bottle of red hanging at his side. Uncle Todd cleared his throat again, louder than before. Mom's fork slipped from her hand and clinked onto her plate. She opened the folder. Her fingers lingered on the first page, then turned it, and her face drained. Her eyes moved quickly over the numbers and dates, back and forth, trying to catch up with what she was seeing. It was all there, page after page, years of quiet help, years of me taking care of the things they thought just happened. What is this supposed to mean? Her voice came out thin. It means you do not have to worry about me anymore. I will not be a burden. I did not say it with anger. I said it with something softer than that. Relief. Clarity. Because I was not looking for an apology. I was handing them reality. Laying out the math of our family in a language they could not pretend not to understand. Jason started flipping through the pages, less careful than she had been. His eyes snagged on certain lines. Amounts. Dates he remembered for other reasons. Wait, what? You paid the property tax last year, and the year before, and the winter gas bill, and the copay for her physical therapy. I heard my own voice and realized how calm I sounded. No edge, no shake, just facts. He sat down slowly, like his knees had stopped trusting him. Quiet. Hands gripping the edge of the couch. I watched their faces shift, from confused, to stunned, to exposed. The silence in that room was louder than anything Mom had said at the table. She tried to speak again. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes were shiny, but no words came out. Because she knew. They all knew. They had not just insulted me, they had betrayed the one person who had been silently holding the floorboards together. The one who kept the lights on and the heat running and the bank from knocking on the door. And I let the silence do the rest. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I didn't stay for the fallout. I picked up my coat, wrapped the scarf around my neck twice, and walked back out into the Tennessee night. The air had that sharp December bite, the kind that slips under your skin and wakes every nerve. I welcomed it. Behind me, I could still hear nothing. No chair scraping, no hushed apologies, no one moving to the door, no footsteps, no one calling my name, not even Mom. Her voice had always been the loudest thing in my life. The fact that it stayed silent when I walked away told me everything I needed to know. I didn't look back. The yard light threw pale beams over the driveway. The shadows of the bare trees striped the gravel. The driveway gravel crunched beneath my boots as I got in my car. I had heard that sound 1,000 times, coming and going from this house. This time, my hands were empty. I sat in the dark for a moment, keys in the ignition, seatbelt still off. The interior light faded out and left me there in that small, quiet space. No music, no headlights, just the soft tick of the engine cooling. Just me and the realization that I had finally stopped waiting to be loved properly. That realization did not crash over me. It slipped in quietly. A simple truth taking a seat in a room it should have owned years ago. You know what they never talk about? How exhausting it is to be the strong one. How your body starts to confuse normal with tension. How nobody checks on the person who holds it all together. They assume you are fine because you have always been the one who fixes everything. They do not talk about how easily people forget kindness when it is quiet, how the loudest people in the room get all the concern, how the one who shows up and pays and signs and calls is treated like part of the background. From the outside, they saw a single woman with no husband and no kids. They saw the apartment, the small car, the job that did not sound important to them when I tried to explain it at Thanksgiving. They heard operations coordinator and turned it into something on the computer. They did not see the spreadsheets I kept on my laptop. Tabs labeled Mom and House and Jason. Color-coded reminders in my phone about when Mom's prescriptions were due. Calendar alerts I honored even when I was tired after a 10-hour day. They did not see the nights I stayed up emailing Jason's creditors on his behalf, me on my couch with my laptop, writing polite, professional messages to companies that only knew him as an overdue account number, asking for extensions, setting up payment plans. I kept it all going because I thought that maybe one day they would notice. Maybe they would look past the surface and see the scaffolding I was holding up. Maybe they would say thank you without me having to prompt them. They didn't. Not really. They only noticed when I slipped. When a bill got close to due because I had been sick that week. When a prescription had to be picked up a day late because I was out of town. Those were the moments they remembered. Until I stopped. Until that folder landed on the coffee table and the auto payments went dark. I turned the key and backed out of the driveway, watching the house shrink smaller in my rearview mirror. The porch light glowed like it always did, that warm yellow square against the night. For the first time, it did not look like home. It looked like a building I used to know. The road back to my apartment was almost empty. Christmas lights blinked on porches as I passed. Life going on. None of them knowing that in a small brick house off a side street, a family had just been stripped down to the truth. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, my hands had stopped shaking. I carried my purse up the stairs, opened my door to the faint smell of coffee and laundry detergent, and let the quiet wrap around me. I stood in the middle of my small living room, listening to my own breathing. For the first time in years, it felt like I was not late for something. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment to a dozen missed calls. My phone buzzed against the nightstand as the latest voicemail icon appeared. The screen was a small square of light in the gray morning. 7 from Jason, 2 from Mom. Even Trish had texted. Hey, can we talk? Didn't know all that stuff. The word sat there, tiny and nervous. I stared at the notifications, thumb hovering over the screen. My old reflex kicked in, the one that said answer, fix it, smooth it over. I felt it rise, then I watched it pass. I didn't respond. Instead, I swung my legs out of bed and felt the cold floor meet my feet. I made coffee the way I always did. Filter in, scoop the grounds. Listen to the machine gurgle and sigh. I sat on my second-hand couch, the one with the slightly uneven leg, and opened the window to let in the cold. The air rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying the faint sound of a distant train and someone scraping ice off a windshield in the parking lot below. It felt like I could finally breathe again. A full breath that did not get stuck halfway up my chest. 3 days passed. I went to work. I answered emails, scheduled deliveries, solved problems for people who appreciated it. I came home. I cooked simple meals. My phone kept lighting up on the table, buzzing with numbers I knew by heart and ones I had not seen in years. I let it buzz. There was guilt, of course. It showed up at night. That old familiar voice that asked if I was being selfish. That wondered if Mom was sitting in the dark or if Jason was spiraling. But underneath the guilt, there was something steadier this time. A decision. Then came the knock. It was late afternoon on the third day. The sun was already low, throwing soft gold light across my living room rug. I was halfway through folding laundry when I heard it. 3 knocks on the door. Not the light tap of a delivery driver, not the hurried pattern of a neighbor. My stomach tightened. I already knew who it was before I checked the peephole. I opened the door, and there stood Jason, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like he was trying to look smaller. That same sheepish tilt of his head he used when he was 16 and broke Mom's favorite lamp. He looked older now. There were lines at the corners of his eyes. His beard was a little patchier, like he had forgotten to shave on purpose. "Can I come in?" His voice was quieter than usual. None of the forced bravado he used when he talked about his big plans at family dinners. I didn't say yes. I just stepped aside and let the space between us become my answer. He walked in slowly, looking around like he had never really seen my place before. The small bookshelf against the wall. The plant on the windowsill that I kept half alive. The framed print I bought on sale. He didn't sit. Just stood in the middle of the room, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I didn't rush to fill the silence. For years, I had filled every silence in our family. This time, I let it stretch. I didn't know, like, any of that. The words tumbled out of him in a rush. "You didn't ask." He flinched. "Just a little. I thought Mom was covering the bills, or that things were just fine somehow." Somehow. That's the word, isn't it? You all thought everything just worked out. Somehow. He nodded, slow, ran a hand down his face. "She's panicking. Said the electric's due next week and she doesn't know how to pay it." I didn't react. Not on the outside. Inside, I felt a familiar list forming automatically. Due dates, possible extensions, places I could move money from. That old machine in my head tried to start back up. I let it stall. I just waited. "You're really cutting everything off?" "Already did." The words surprised even me with how steady they sounded. Silence again. He looked at the floor, then at the window, then at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. "I don't blame you." He almost whispered it. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. Not as the big brother who always seemed to fill a room with his stories. Not as the boy Mom favored because he carried her expectations more loudly. Just as a man who suddenly realized the ground under his feet was not solid, and that I had been the one holding it together. He wasn't crying, but something in him had cracked. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, in the way his eyes couldn't hold mine for long. "Why now, Jason? Why show up now?" He shrugged, eyes dropping back to the floor. "Because you were right. You're not the burden. We were." He left not long after. He didn't ask for money, didn't hint at it, didn't slide into the old pattern of, "I'll pay you back," or "just this once." He just stood at the door, hand on the knob, and looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "If you ever need anything, I mean it." And for once, I believed him. But not because I needed him. I had proven to myself that I could survive without their help. I believed him because, for the first time in years, he was not saying it to get something out of me. He was saying it because he finally saw me. Over the next week, the rest of the family unraveled. Mom sent a long email. The subject line was my name. That alone told me she was trying to make it serious. Not an apology. More like a justification. Paragraphs about how hard things had been. How much stress she had been under. "You've always been so strong. I thought you could handle it. I didn't mean you were a burden to me. I meant to yourself." I read it slowly. I didn't reply, because she had meant it. In that moment at the table, she had meant every word, and because it didn't matter anymore. The impact of the sentence did not change just because she tried to bend the intention after the fact. Her words were just a paper shield against the reality she was finally feeling. That without me, the structure collapsed. The bills did not pay themselves. The appointments did not schedule themselves. Uncle Todd called too. His number flashed across my screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail. He cleared his throat, made small talk for a minute, and then finally said it. He could chip in for Mom's medication. He didn't realize things were so tight. They were never tight. The money was not the problem. I had a decent job. They had options. I just stopped carrying the weight so they could feel how heavy it really was. The most unexpected message came from Trish. A Facebook DM of all things. "Hey, I'm embarrassed. I thought you were just distant. Didn't know you were doing all that behind the scenes. If you ever want to talk, or just hang, I'd like that." I stared at the message for a long time. The little profile picture in the corner. The timestamp. The blinking cursor in the reply box. Not because I was emotional in a dramatic way, but because it was the first time in years someone had seen me without needing something from me. She was not asking for money or a ride or a favor. She was just reaching out. And I realized that I didn't need an apology to move on. I needed peace. And that came the moment I decided to stop proving my worth to people who had already made up their minds. The moment I understood that no amount of quiet sacrifice was going to change the story they told themselves about me. Let me tell you something I've never said out loud. They didn't break me at that dinner. They revealed themselves. They showed me who they were when they thought the help was endless and the patience had no bottom. And I didn't ruin my family by walking away. I saved myself. I still remember the way the folder felt in my hands. Light, thin, a little worn at the edges, but holding the weight of everything I'd carried for years. It didn't explode. It didn't scream. It didn't demand attention. It just told the truth. That was enough. That was all it ever took. They never invited me to Christmas again. Not directly. The following year, I got a group text from Jason as I was leaving the grocery store. My hands were full of bags. My phone buzzed in my pocket. And for a second, I thought it was work. It was a little gray bubble in the family group chat. "Mom's hosting again. You're welcome if you want." That was it. No mention of what happened. No apology from her. No acknowledgement that the last Christmas had ended with my whole life spread out on a coffee table. Just a vague olive branch, tossed into a group chat like we were talking about a movie night. I stood in the parking lot, breath turning white in the air, reading that line over and over. "You're welcome if you want." Like I had just been busy last time. Like I had simply missed it. For a moment, habit reached for my throat. The old part of me that still wanted to be included. The child who counted chairs around the table and wondered if there would be room for her. Then a quieter part of me spoke up. The one I had been listening to more lately. "You don't have to bleed to prove you belong." I locked my car, set the grocery bags down on the back seat, and typed back one simple line. "Thanks for the invite. I'm doing my own thing this year. Hope it goes well." No explanations, no guilt, no essay about boundaries. Just a clear no. I hit send, watched the little delivered appear, and slid my phone into my coat pocket. The sky above the parking lot was that heavy winter gray that never quite turns to snow. People pushed carts through slush. Somewhere, a Christmas song played faintly through a tinny outdoor speaker. Instead, I spent Christmas alone, and it was quiet, but not lonely. That morning, I woke up to soft light coming through the blinds instead of the chaos of everyone shouting over each other. No alarm. No rushing to get dressed early enough to be the helpful daughter. I lay there in my bed for a long moment, listening to the heater hum. I made myself coffee in my favorite chipped mug, the one nobody else ever touched or criticized. I turned on some music low in the background, not holiday carols, just something soft and calm. I took my time seasoning the rosemary chicken. Fresh garlic, Olive oil, salt, pepper, sprigs of rosemary I had bought just for this. My tiny kitchen filled with the smell of roasting meat and herbs instead of the usual burned rolls and stress. I opened a bottle of wine no one would roll their eyes at. No one asked how much it cost. No one told me I should have brought something more practical. I poured myself a generous glass and let it breathe on the counter while the chicken finished. I ate at my little table by the window. One plate, one napkin, candle burning in a thrift store holder. I did not set out 5 dishes to prove I could host. I did not rush around making sure everyone else was comfortable. I took seconds without anyone commenting on my appetite. I let food stay on the plate if I was full without anyone asking if I was on a diet again. After dinner, I changed into my softest pajamas, the ones with tiny holes at the cuffs that I had never worn to my mother's house because I knew exactly what she would say. I curled up on my couch, pulled my old fleece blanket over my legs, and scrolled through a list of old movies. Not the ones my family liked, not the ones we watched out of habit, just the ones I loved. I watched them without commentary in the background. No one talked over the important scenes. No one snorted at the romantic parts. No one criticized the plot. I wrapped myself in peace like it was a weighted blanket I should have bought years ago. There's something sacred about no longer shrinking to fit where you're not loved. It feels strange at first, like wearing a new pair of shoes. Stiff, unfamiliar. You keep waiting for the pinch, for the blister. But then you realize that the tightness you lived with all those years was not normal. It was just familiar. I didn't go no contact with my family. That's not always possible, or even necessary. But I set terms, clear ones. I would answer calls that were about birthdays or recipes or random stories. I would not pick up to listen to a crisis I was expected to fix. I would visit for a weekend afternoon, not move mountains to stay 3 days and clean the kitchen as payment for existing. I wouldn't be the emergency fund anymore. I removed my card numbers from accounts that weren't mine. I stopped being the person the pharmacy called when a prescription bounced. I wouldn't be the invisible scaffolding holding up the people who called me useless. If they wanted a structure, they could build it themselves or ask each other. I wouldn't answer calls that came with strings, the ones that opened with, "Hey, how are you?" but rushed straight into, "Can you just?" 10 seconds later. And I wouldn't stay silent when they tried to rewrite history. When someone said, "We all pitched in back then," I would say calmly, "No, I did that." When Mom glossed over the past as a hard time we all went through, I reminded her who made the calls and signed the checks. No shouting, no drama, just the truth. One day in March, I got a letter from the county clerk. It came in one of those official envelopes with the little window, stacked between a coupon flyer and a credit card offer. I almost tossed it into the pile on my counter before I noticed the return address. My stomach tightened, but my hands did not shake. I sat down at my table, slid a finger under the flap, and opened it. The property had fallen behind again. Taxes unpaid, fees mounting, lines of numbers, due dates, penalties, a neat summary of consequences. A year ago, that letter would have felt like a fire alarm. I would have jumped up, grabbed my phone, opened my banking app, and started figuring out how to fix it, even if it meant skipping my own rent or stretching one paycheck into 3. Now, it wasn't my problem anymore. That sentence felt strange in my mouth. Not cruel, not detached, just true. But I did forward the letter to Mom. Not with a panicked call, not with a frantic explanation, just with process, certified USPS, return receipt requested. I stood in line at the post office, holding the thick envelope addressed in my neat handwriting. The clerk weighed it, stamped it, handed me the little green card to track the signature. She signed for it. I saw her name scrawled across the digital confirmation a few days later, proof that the information had reached her doorstep. I didn't hear back. No explosion. No screaming voicemail blaming me for not stepping in. Just silence. Jason called a week later. His name lit up my phone while I was standing at my kitchen sink, rinsing dishes. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Old patterns tugged at me. I dried my hands and answered. She's scared. Doesn't know what to do. His voice was softer than usual. No jokes. No small talk. Neither did I. Back then. The words came out before I had time to polish them. Simple. Honest. He was quiet a long time. I could hear the faint buzz of his television in the background, a car passing outside wherever he was. I imagined him sitting on the edge of his couch, rubbing a hand over his face like he always did when he was thinking. You were the glue. I laughed. Not out of joy, but because it was absurd how long it took them to realize. You don't thank the glue. You just notice when things fall apart. There was no heat in my voice. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. For years, they had rested their weight on me without asking if I could carry it. Now that the structure was failing, they were shocked to see the beams. They called me selfish. Right before they stole everything I earned. They called me dramatic. Until I calmly removed myself from the narrative they wrote without me. She called me a burden. And for once, I let her carry her own weight. The guilt tried to creep in again. Late at night. When the world was quiet and my old training whispered that daughters are supposed to fix things. But I had learned something since then. Something I wish someone had told me at 25. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they fed you once. You don't owe anyone access to your life because they share your last name. And you don't have to bleed every time someone else gets a paper cut. You can say no, and still be kind. You can stop helping, and still have a good heart. Kindness without boundaries is just self-erasure. I did not want to disappear to keep other people comfortable anymore. My story isn't one of revenge in the way people expect. I didn't destroy anyone. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't post screenshots or send dramatic letters. I did not gather the family around for a final speech. I just stopped saving them. And they drowned in their own reflection. They watched themselves in the mirror of their choices. In the past due notices. In the quiet house when no one swooped in with a check. It has been 2 years since that dinner. 2 Christmases where my phone buzzed with group texts and I chose my own peace instead. In that time, life kept moving. I changed positions at work, took on more responsibility, not because I had to prove anything to them, but because I finally made decisions for me. I made new friends who did not flinch when I said no. I started therapy and sat in a room with someone who did not benefit from my exhaustion. We still speak, briefly, cordially. Sometimes Mom calls on Sunday afternoons. The conversations stay in shallow water. Weather, her favorite show. Whether Jason has been by. No talk of bills. No talk of what I owe. Sometimes Jason texts me a picture of his kids with frosting on their faces, or a joke he knows I will appreciate. Sometimes Trish reacts to my posts with a little heart and sends me recipes she thinks I might like. On the surface, it looks normal. But something changed that night. And it wasn't just them. It was me. I stopped auditioning for a role I was born into. They looked at me and saw weakness, dependency, a failure to launch. But I was never the burden. I was the bank account, the emergency contact, the therapist, the safety net. I was the one they called when the car broke down, when the doctor's office needed a card on file, when the school wanted a contact number and Mom didn't want to put her own. And when I stopped showing up that way, they had to meet themselves for the first time. They had to talk to the bank, call the county clerk, sit with their own panic and ask each other for help instead of pointing everything at me. I don't hate them. I don't even resent them anymore. Resentment is just a rope tying you to the past. I was tired of dragging that behind me, but I'll never forget the feeling of sitting at that Christmas table, my fork halfway to my mouth, as my own mother carved me up in front of everyone. You're just a burden. The words landed harder than any slammed door ever could. I remember the weight of my fork, the way my fingers tightened around the handle, the way every sound in the room faded except for my own heartbeat. I folded my napkin that night like it was the last chapter of a book I didn't want to finish. I smoothed the fabric, set it down beside my plate, and chose to stop reading a story where I was always cast as the problem. And I walked away. Not angry, not loud, just free. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.